Rebel forces are standing on the doorstep of the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, amid a very tense atmosphere throughout the country, and news of the imminent fall of the capital of the second largest country in Africa in terms of population. What are the effects of this on the neighboring countries and the Horn of Africa? A grinding civil war looms on the horizon and expectations of a terrible bloodbath. This is the picture that several regional and international parties expect of what will happen in Ethiopia, which may also result in the disintegration of the federal state into several states that are united only by intense ethnic hatred. UN Under-Secretary-General for Political Affairs Rosemary DiCarlo said the year-long conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region has reached catastrophic levels. The risk of Ethiopia sliding into a growing civil war is all too real, she told the Security Council. What happened? In 2020, there was news of an attack by the forces of the Tigray region in the north of the country on the camps of the Federal Army, after which Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered on 4 November 2020, a military response to the attack. But the Tigray People's Liberation Front denied carrying out the attack. The front says that what Ahmed announced was just a pretext to invade the region. The intensification of fighting has sent tens of thousands of people fleeing to neighboring Sudan, which is beset by mounting political problems. 10 days after the outbreak of the fighting, the United Nations warned of possible war crimes in Tigray. Neighboring Eritrea sent troops to Tigray to support the Ethiopian forces, but Addis Ababa denied this. The confrontations escalated between the two sides until Abiy Ahmed admitted on March 23, 2021 that the Eritrean forces had entered Tigray, and the next day the Ethiopian Commission for Human Rights announced that Eritrean soldiers had massacred more than 100 civilians in Aksum. On June 28, with the advance of the Tigray Defense Forces, the interim administration appointed by Abiy left Mekele, the capital of Tigray, which constituted a turning point in the conflict. The federal government declared a unilateral ceasefire, to which the rebels agreed in principle but vowed to continue fighting if their conditions were not met. But on July 14, 4 days after Abiy's party won the elections, he vowed to repel the attacks. The following day, 3 regions announced that they would deploy troops in support of federal operations in Tigray. The conflict extended to 2 regions bordering Tigray, Afar and Amhara. In October, the conflict entered a new turning point with Ethiopian planes carrying out air strikes on Mekele, launching an aerial bombing campaign in Tigray. With reports of widespread rape, murder, and looting by the conflicting forces, it is feared that the country is approaching horrific massacres that no one may be able to stop soon. Will the capital fall? Today Addis Ababa is holding its breath and military helicopters are hovering over parts of the city. A state of mystery and fear dominates daily life in the Ethiopian capital. 1 year later, the war had reached the heart of Africa's second most populous country. Many Ethiopians have fled battlefields in Tigray, Afar and Oromia to Addis Ababa. But after 12 months of conflict in Ethiopia, the capital's residents are in an economic crisis, said Michael Troster, director of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Ethiopia, with massive inflation squeezing the breath of citizens daily. The rebel alliance, made up of the Tigray People's Liberation Front and the Oromo Liberation Army, is less than 400 kilometers from the capital of 5 million people, and in the east they want to cut off the supply route that connects the city to the important port in neighboring Djibouti. People are wondering when the capital will fall, at a time when the authorities have called for arming themselves and defending the capital. The conflict has led to a serious humanitarian crisis in the country, with millions of people now dependent on aid. The internationally celebrated reformist, Abiy Ahmed, became a party to the conflict and has come under fire for horrific human rights abuses, because of which Western donors, especially the United States, have cut off much aid to Ethiopia. Ethnicities scattered across the country. In an interview with DW from Kenya, Alice Wirimo Ndirto, the UN Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, said African countries are governed by colonial borders and these colonial borders divide ethnic communities in two. For example, the Oromo are found in Kenya and Ethiopia, Somalis are found in Somalia and Ethiopia, and the Luo are found in Ethiopia and South Sudan. So the risk of cross-border conflict and its spread is very high at the moment. We need the intervention of international actors. Ethiopia's neighbors need to work to ensure that cross-border conflicts are prevented before they happen and not dealt with when they occur, Ndirto added. She welcomed the statements of Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who said they are now working to support Ethiopia. It's a very positive step. Ndirto stresses that the crisis is much deeper than the problem of the Tigrayans and the Oromos. This is an Ethiopian problem. If we solve the Tigrayan problem today and do not solve what is happening in the Oromo region, we will face another problem in the future. But what has complicated matters and reduced the possibility of reaching a truce between the conflicting parties is that the Ethiopian Prime Minister has repeatedly said that he cannot negotiate with the Tigray Liberation Front because it has been designated as a terrorist organization. Neighboring countries are preparing for a humanitarian crisis. In a related context, the Kenyan government announced tightening security measures along its 800 kilometers northern border with Ethiopia. Police have also set up additional roadblocks to monitor the movement of weapons and foreigners who may attempt to enter Kenya illegally. Local communities and the Kenyan government fear the influx of Ethiopian refugees. Northern Kenya is already home to refugee camps in Kakuma in the northwest and Dadaab in the northeast. It is among the largest refugee camps in the world. For the past few years, Kenyan officials have been pushing hard to close the camps entirely by mid-2022, a plan that could be spoiled by the new refugees from Ethiopia. There is a possibility that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of refugees will flow into Kenya. Hassan Kinigi, director of the Nairobi-based Institute for Strategic Studies, told DW. It would impose huge costs on Kenya, he said, adding that it could lead to a humanitarian situation for which Kenya is not prepared. It comes as 2 million people are currently facing a food insecurity crisis in northern Kenya, with the United Nations describing the situation as particularly dangerous due to the lack of rainfall. The conflict in Ethiopia also appears to have indirectly weakened the implementation of the peace agreement in neighboring South Sudan. In recent years, Ethiopia has played a mediating role between rival factions of President Salva Kiir and former opposition leader Riek Machar. Observers fear that the peace process in South Sudan will become more difficult with the continuation of the war in Ethiopia. Also, hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the South Sudan war took refuge in the Ethiopian Gambela region on Sudan's western border with Ethiopia. And if the Ethiopian war continues, it will lead, according to experts, to economic destabilization on the border between South Sudan and Ethiopia. But experts and observers believe that the outcome of the war in Ethiopia may lead to the removal of Abiy Ahmed from the political scene, which will reflect positively on the crisis of the Renaissance Dam with Egypt and Sudan, especially since he was the most strict Ethiopian official than his predecessors in this thorny file, which raises extraordinary concern in the downstream countries. Especially since the capacity of the reservoir may exceed the shares of the downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, of the Nile water, which raises doubts about its purpose. Rebel forces are standing on the doorstep of the Ethiopian capital.